Grand Maître is a man who can dance, choreograph, and collaborate with musical geniuses at the highest levels. He is the mastermind behind many large-scale ballets and extravaganzas. One of his new works showcases the ballet of today. It's called Love Lies Bleeding, with music by Sir Elton John and Bernie Taupin, or Taupin. Grand Maître is the artistic director of Alberta Ballet. Sometimes he's called the King of Pop Ballet. It is my pleasure to welcome Grand Maître back to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Hello.
Nice to see you again.
Yes.
I wonder if you grew up listening to Rocket Man or
did.
Elton John.
Rocket Man, David Bowie, the 70s were so colorful and so brilliant that way, but Elton John especially. My first kiss was to Elton John, you know, and he helped us, you know, understand the 70s in a way, so it was a very close relationship already before I even got to meet him.
Did you ever think in your wildest dreams you would one day sit down with Elton John and collaborate?
On a ballet, no. Never thought it would happen. But, you know, it all started with Joni Mitchell, of course.
Really? Tell me.
Well, Joni and I became good friends after our creation, which was performed in Vancouver for the Olympiads. And she was having dinner here in Vancouver with one of Elton's managers one night and told him all about the ballet. And the week after, Elton was in Calgary touring. And he asked to meet the company, the dancers. He loves Joni Mitchell, and he wanted a DVD of the ballet, and that's how it all started.
Had he seen The Fiddle and the Drum?
He saw it on DVD.
He saw it on DVD.
Which Joni herself edited. She directed that film, so he was really curious to see what we came up with.
And I bet you thought instantly, wow.
I did, absolutely. And, you know, Elton John's music is so danceable. It's so theatrical. He was such a presence. You know, in the 70s, it's like a circus act. There was so much theatricality. So there was a lot of, you know, information there and ideas for creating a ballet.
I bet. And what didn't you know about Reginald Kenneth Dwight? Isn't that his real name?
Yes.
Reggie
Dwight.
Reggie Dwight.
That's his real name.
What didn't you know about him? His passions, his music?
I didn't know that, you know, first he went to a classical conservatory. That's where he trained as a musician.
You
and
can
he
tell.
was very good. But he was very introverted, very shy, and that explains all the costumes and the glasses. It's a bit of a, he's hiding behind that masquerade that he put on for a decade, which was brilliant, but it was a masquerade in a way. He could not be himself. And that's because he was very, very shy. So when you start to study these people to create a ballet about their lives and their music, you discover a lot of interesting things like that.
I'm sure, and he had pain, a lot of pain, as we all do, but he was gay, he didn't come out for a while.
Yes, it took
dare
courage.
come out for a while.
I mean, Ricky Martin came out last year, you know.
Exactly,
So
Elton was ahead of him.
He was ahead of him by almost 15 years, yeah.
Where do you start to collaborate on a ballet? Second meeting?
Well, the first meeting was before a concert in Calgary, and he was like a prize fighter before a world title fight. His energy was unbelievable in the dressing room. So it was mostly saying hello, giving them the DVD, meeting the dancers, which was very gracious from him. And then the second meeting we did in Las Vegas a year later on Valentine's Day. I'll always remember at Caesar's Palace, where he was performing in a suite that looked like something out of a Citizen Kane movie, you know. And he was, at that time is when we started talking about the creation and what the ballet could look like. But there was almost 6 months in between the two meetings, which gave me time to really research his entire catalog, because he's written hundreds of songs. You know, there's a lot to find out about him.
For sure. And Bernie Taupin, or Bernie Taupin, is a great lyricist.
Yes, Bernie Taupin and him, you know, they were introduced in this little studio in London where he was working as an administrator in a way, you know, helping produce other singers' records. And they introduced him to Bernie Taupin, and they started living together at Elton's mom's house. And together they wrote 3 albums there, I think, and almost every song Elton ever composed off Bernie's lyrics, he wrote in under an hour. So that he would have a drawer full of lyrics by Bernie, and then one day he'd feel melancholic, he'd take out one of the more melancholic songs that Bernie had written, and an hour later, you know, there was Benny and the Jets, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and he's just like a Polaroid of emotion, which is, I think, why Elton John's music is so intense. He has a way of grabbing us.
A small genius, a large genius. It's, when you talk to people who are so good at what they do, it's often like they just channeled it. If we could talk to Mozart.
Yes.
Just came through.
Facility,
we could talk to you
say.
when you're choreographing, because you have this world rep.
I have to work hard.
I
think it was Mendelssohn who used to say some artists have talent, some have genius, and some have more facility. And I think Elton was one of those, yeah, for sure.
Perhaps. And my friend Ron James, the comedian, says comedy is the longest apprenticeship in the world.
Yes.
And maybe choreographing ballet is the longest apprenticeship in the world. How did you get to be so good at it? Who gave you the best advice? Was it practice, practice, practice?
Older
What?
choreographers that I met. I always like to talk to experienced creators of dance, and you know, they always said to me, diversify, work with multimedia, work with all forms of dance, work with actors and circus performers, learn your craft, be curious, be very self-critical. And I've had the opportunity to work with many great dancers and many great designers, set designers, costume designers, as with this performance. And you know, you're never doing it by yourself. There's the inspirations and the collaborators, and they all come together.
Love Lies Bleeding, a critic said, is a ballet that makes you think.
Well, that's yes, and I'm glad that some people write about that, because you could think that creating pop ballets would be something easy, and it's not easy. It's some of the harder ballets I've had to choreograph.
Really?
More difficult than sometimes Stravinsky or classical composers.
Tchaikovsky.
Oh yes, because people have been listening to Elton John their whole life, and they remember things to the songs. You know, they have their own image of what Elton John is to them. So you have to come up with an aesthetic proposition that they will accept and will surprise them. Yeah.
Well, I know your principal dancer, Kelly McGinley.
Yes, and Yukichi Hattori. There's two dancers performing.
Two dancers,
Yes.
Hattori. So Kelly McGinley plays the fan,
Yes.
the Elton John fan.
Yes. Well, it's like Michael Jackson or Elton John. If you're going to do a ballet about them, do not reproduce them. Nobody can reproduce these
I
people.
guess not.
So the concept was that it was a fan, a great fan of Elton John, who a little bit becomes an avatar of Elton John, you know, like the movie being John Malkovich. He goes into his head
Really?
and starts reliving some of the experiences that superstars live, which
How
are
great.
not easy.
So through the brain tunnel,
Yes.
on the road,
Yes.
the managers,
The drugs,
the mayhem,
the
the
touring,
drugs.
the power, the money. You know, Joni Mitchell said to me, before the Beatles, musicians didn't know how powerful and rich they could become in civilization, you know, in society.
Sure.
And so it's an inhumane life in a way. You look at Amy Winehouse, you look at Kurt Cobain and the Janis Joplins and Michael Jackson. It goes on and on and on, and actors as well. And so what's interesting about Elton John is he almost died a few times in his career, but he came back. You know, I'm still standing, and he came back big. And he found values and love in life, and now he's raising hundreds of millions of dollars for charities. And so he's performing for all the right reasons. So it's an interesting story for a ballet.
I'm sure, but Kelly was quoted as saying that he's never been so stressed on stage
Yes.
in his 10 years of being a principal dancer. Never playing this role.
Yes.
Why?
Well, you know, Joni Mitchell in their music is we could go more minimalistic in our aesthetics, but Elton John is the circus, it's the theater, it's everything
The
imaginable.
candle in the wind.
It's the candle in the wind and the chandelier on his head and the chicken in a wedding dress, you know. And somehow I told the Alberta Ballet staff, you know, we need to have production values with Elton John. It's Vegas, it's Broadway, it's everything. And so they were very courageous, and we went all the way with this. So the dancers have to rollerblade, they have to fly through the sky a little bit like a Cirque du Soleil, they have to hip hop, contemporary ballet, you name it, it's in the show. It had to be there.
So a little jazz, a little Bob Fosse.
A little Fosse, who I love, Bob Fosse.
Me
is
too.
one of my
I met him,
legends.
you know.
You met Bob Fosse?
Yes.
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
Well, I'd love to hear
But
about that.
after the break.
Okay.
All right. Love Lies Bleeding, ballet in Vancouver tomorrow night opens.
Opens Thursday,
Right?
Friday, Saturday.
Balletbc.com for more information. Love Lies Bleeding. We'll come back with Jean Grand Maître.